Joined here by prominent attorney Carissa Kranz. Carissa, you know, we're listening to this testimony of the most important witness, arguably, in the case. The eyewitness testimony, or ear witness, at least for one point, and then...
Right, but she should have her eyes on the road.
Well, that's the question, right? So how much do you think she can be relied on to have remembered every detail when she's turning around after it happens and then has to figure out how to get to the hospital and drive there?
Oh, that's exactly right. If I were the defense attorney, I would be casting doubt on her testimony, because she's supposed to be paying attention to the road. She's supposed to be driving them to the hospital. She's supposed to be listening to Tex's directions to get to Emory Hospital. And I don't know how she could be so accurate in her recount, step by step by step, of how she turned around and how Tex was holding her. So absolutely, I agree. I don't know how much we could rely on what she's saying.
And I want to just show a live shot again of the courtroom. This is an expert, Nicole Carroll, who's from the Georgia Bureau of Investigation. She pulled out the gun, which seemed like it was going to be one of those holy cow moments. Oh my goodness, the gun is being introduced in this case. This must be huge. Well, you know why we're not live in it? Because, shocker, there's no DNA found on the weapon. Why is that obvious? Carissa?
Because he shot through the bag. So, again, we're being distracted. The jury is getting all this information to distract them, when really all that matters is what was his intent at the time the bullet was fired. Did he intend...
The gun was fired through a bag.
Right.
Through a bag.
Mind you, right after his wife said to him, "Darling, don't fall asleep back there. Don't fall asleep. Hey, you're falling asleep back there." While they're in a bad neighborhood, because she was clearly aware that it was also a bad neighborhood, because let's not forget, she handed him the gun in the plastic bag.
This is kind of a terrible case. I mean, look.
It's a not guilty if I were a juror. There is reasonable doubt all over this case.
And there's not many cases that we cover where from beginning to end you say, I'm expecting a not guilty verdict. A lot of them it's like, well, it's kind of close. Probably did it, maybe, you know.
To me, the most interesting part of this case is the jurors' questions.
Yeah.
Because that is gleaming insight into how the jury is taking in all this confusing evidence that is very repetitive, and it's off course of what really matters, which is the intent. Because there's no doubt that he killed her. He's not saying I didn't kill her.
I got to say, I was sure that Tex McIver was going to have to take the witness stand in the context of this case. Because, you know, he admits he shot her and you want to explain. But I'm not sure anymore that he's going to have to testify.
Well, he may not have to testify, but when the state rests, what'll be interesting is if the defense decides to put him on to testify in his own defense or not. If I were his defense attorney, at this point, I wouldn't put my client on and subject him to cross-examination. I would say the state hasn't met their burden.
Yeah, but, but what is really going to be so hard for him to explain on cross-examination? It seems like they got to... I mean, it's not like he was like one of these guys where they're going to suddenly bring up his horrible past and right? I mean,
no, but they could get into all sorts of confusing, convoluted evidence of more of the money and follow the money, which then distracts the juror. And if I were the defense, I would rather poke holes in the prosecution's case and say they didn't meet their burden and that there's reasonable doubt all over this case and that they have to follow the law.
Let's go back to the testimony of Danny Jo Carter. She is the critical witness in this case, the eyewitness, the best friend of the victim, and she testified about that drive to the hospital. Let's listen to her a little bit more.
Why didn't you call 911?
My phone was in the back seat because I really hadn't been able to use it all weekend.
So where was it in the back seat?
In my purse.
And why didn't you use Dan Abrams' phone? Did she have a phone?
Yes, I didn't know where it was, and at that time I was driving, and even if it was down here in the console, I couldn't look down to get it.
Can you tell the jurors, did you know whether or not he had a phone?
Well, I knew he had a phone, yes.
Where was it?
It was in the backseat with him.
All right, so that's the key witness sitting in a remade SUV to show exactly where she was sitting and what she might have seen. But I want to tell you about something that happened live in the courtroom just a moment ago. The jurors got to ask questions, and they were asking details about what it would take for DNA results to show up on the gun. even though the gun was shot through a bag, apparently. What does that tell you, Carissa?
It tells me that the jurors are losing sight and focus of what really matters, which is intent. Instead, there's no question that Tex shot the gun and killed his wife. That's not an issue here.
But wouldn't it be a bigger deal if he reached his hand into the bag and shot as opposed to from the outside of the bag?
I guess that's why they're getting to the time frame of DNA to see if it's possible his DNA would have showed up on the gun if they tested it sooner, because then that may have implied that he stuck his hand in the bag and shot the gun and had it on the trigger. That's the only possible thing. Otherwise, it's an irrelevant question.
Right. One of the critical questions, though, in this case is how hard he would have had to pull the trigger. It depends if the gun was cocked, not cocked, etc. All right, let's get in a break. We are still live inside that courtroom. Law and Crime Network here on Crime and Investigations. Coming right back. Welcome back. Court is wrapping up for the day in the murder trial of Tex McIver. I believe the jurors have been told that they can leave. The judge dealing with some housekeeping issues with the attorneys in this case. That gives us an opportunity. I think that's a wave goodbye, and goodbye to you, sir, and goodbye to all the participants there. But we want to finish. We were playing the testimony of the critical witness in this case, Danny Jo Carter, the woman who was driving the car. Tex McIver shoots his wife in the back seat of the car. And one of the questions about him is, did he direct them to go to a hospital that wasn't as close or wasn't as specialized? And I guess the theory being that if he takes her to the wrong hospital, maybe she'll die on the way, or if it's not a good enough hospital, they won't provide the sort of medical care that she would need. It seems like kind of a long shot argument to me, but it definitely seems like an issue and an argument, as was told by this critical witness, Danny Jo Carter.
Besides the words, be careful, did he tell you to do anything with your speed?
He may have said, slow down, there may be people out
I
there.
object to the he may not say. No, but this is speculation again, and I move to strike and ask for a cautionary instruction.
So you all, jurors, should disregard what Ms. Carter thinks might have happened. Ms. Carter, if you can remember something, that's great. If you don't, no one's trying to tax your memory. What you remember is what you remember. Okay?
So let's just be clear.
Okay.
Do you remember him saying that?
I'm going to ask you, Carissa Kranz, the ultimate question here. Do you think that at this point, Danny Jo Carter wants to see Tex convicted?
It does appear that she believes that he's guilty because she's the only witness so far that has lent the prosecution any kind of credibility in their case to find him guilty. And she is the star witness. I believe she testified for at least 3 days.
Look, and she's got to be angry that her best friend is dead, right? I mean, you start from that point, which is, let's even assume he didn't do it on purpose, right?
But also in the cross-examination, it came out that they were estranged for a very long period of time as well. Mm-hmm. So I'm not sure how credible her testimony really is, but it's certainly more theatrical than all these other witnesses that we're hearing now about wills and codicils and potential financial motive.
You know, I have to say, look, I didn't follow this case that closely at the outset. I caught up on it to prepare for this. And when I first read about this case, I was thinking, well, come on, guy accidentally shoots his wife, inconsistent story about what he did. Come on, mister. And then I followed the testimony about what's happening, and I'm thinking, wow.
Not guilty.
Yeah, I mean, this, put aside not guilty. It really, really may have been an accident, and it really may be a more likely account of what happened. Right. Than what the prosecution is laying out.
Right. It really is made for TV because the facts of the murder or the killing, shouldn't say murder because I think it's a not guilty, but the facts of how it happened is just so outrageous and such a freak accident that it is interesting to watch and unfold and pick apart, and that's why the jury questions are so interesting, because it's how are the jurors thinking, because they're going to be the ultimate deciders of this case. And what I seem to be seeing is the prosecution is throwing out everything they possibly can to see what sticks.
Yep. And the prosecution's case is wrapping up. We don't know exactly when it's going to wrap up. But the interesting question is going to be, what about when the defense happens? So join us again tomorrow. We will be back live in the Tex McIver case. Maybe the prosecutors will have some new piece of evidence. It won't be a smoking gun because there is a smoking gun. We know who shot it. We'll see you back here at Law and Crime and on Crime and Investigations tomorrow at 9 a.m. Thanks for watching.